Are you looking to be the best video game player of all time, no matter the cost?
And do you hold any world records at this point?
I hold over 2,000 world records, one particular that's noted.
Even if you had to lie, cheat, and deceive to get there, would the glory and attention be worth it? If you answered yes, then be sure to watch this video until the end so you can learn how to avoid making the same mistakes as this buffoon. This is Todd Rogers. And at one point, he held more video game records than anyone else in the world.
Of course, I'm credited as being the first paid professional gamer. I worked for 42 software publishers. I beat a computer on DRAGSTER. That was a perfect run on DRAGSTER. I hold the 85-hour world time, 85 hours nonstop on one continual game. I have over 2,000 records. So there's many, many things that I have.
Todd Rogers was a pioneer in the video game industry, and along with his best bud Billy Mitchell, they are both recognized as some of the first ever professional gamers, and also quite possibly the biggest cheaters. I thought Billy was bad, but I think Todd might be worse. If you haven't seen my Billy Mitchell video yet, be sure to check it out after this. If you don't know who Todd Rogers is, he was popular in the 80s for his numerous video game world records. Born in Oak Lawn, Illinois in 1964, he had a typical Midwestern childhood, enjoying comic books and arcade games, but his life would be forever changed when the revolutionary game system Atari hit the market. To understand how Todd ended up where he did, you have to know a little bit of early video game history. So after Atari's release, a few disgruntled ex-employees banded together to create ACTIVISION, the wildly successful third-party video game publishers that we know today. They were the first third-party video game creators and really stood out when they came onto the market because unlike Atari's game covers that were pretty bland and boring, Activision had brightly colored cases with pictures of the game, and inside each game manual was a challenge. Score a certain amount of points or get a certain time, and you could submit a picture to Activision. In turn, they would send you a patch certifying you as a club member. Get 80,000 points on Dolphin, and you would be awarded the Friends of the Dolphin patch. But score 300,000, and you would be among the elite to earn the Secret Society of the Dolphins patch. This was new, exciting, and a great way to flex your video game muscles among your friends. And Todd Rogers' mission was to earn them all. But patches weren't the only way to claim video game prestige in the 80s. Activision also introduced a newsletter in the fall of '81. In a world where the internet didn't exist, what could be greater than getting your name and picture published in your favorite gaming company's newsletter? The bragging rights were probably out of this world for young boys featured in this magazine. Todd wasn't featured in the first magazine, but you can rest assured he was featured numerous times in the remaining 6 editions. People started to take note of this gamer breaking multiple world records. Activision invited him to demonstrate his gameplay in 1982 at the Consumer Electronics Show, and local news stations ran several stories on him.
17-year-old Todd Rogers is, well, a video game freak. The young man from Chicago got the bug at 14 and now, by almost anyone's definition, might well be considered one of the world champions in home video competition. He holds records in 12 games and ranks among the leading contenders several more, all, we might add, with his parents' approval. The games have become more than just entertainment for Todd. He has completed high school.
It's safe to say he was living most young boys' dreams at this time. He would continue breaking world records in various games and be invited to video game events throughout the 80s and 90s. In 1999, Todd started his job as a referee for Twin Galaxies, the leading video game record keepers at the time. What better way to continue his video game supremacy than having complete access to the official high score records, he probably thought. Todd was extremely respected in the gaming community at this time, but admittedly, when I started this video, I really didn't know a whole lot about the guy. So I was confused at first when, during my research, I was looking at Twin Galaxies' historical database. I searched Todd's name and hundreds of records came up. I was scrolling for so long I thought I had incorrectly searched for him. But no, that wasn't the case. The man claims to have thousands of records in over 300 games. So this brings us to rule number 1. If you're watching this in hopes to one day lie and cheat your way to world records, keep the number of lies to a minimum. Don't lie about such a preposterous amount of records that the amount alone sends up red flags. But lucky for Todd, his reputation had allowed his records to go unquestioned, and he continued reigning supreme as the master of pretty much every video game in existence. Yes, Todd reigned supreme in the land of video game high scores, but his records would soon come under intense scrutiny. In July of 2002, when a thread was opened on AtariAge.com, 32.04 seconds on barnstorming? What? How close can anyone here get to this time? In the perfect example of Todd's unquestioning authority, the first response is, that score is coming from Todd Rogers, like many other top scores, so you better believe it. But the question did spark this commenter's curiosity, and he came back a day later. I've just played a hacked version, no windmills. The best I could get was a 32.07 seconds. How could Todd get a 32.04 when you lose time while moving the plane up and down? Although everything pointed to this score being impossible, most people were not quick to accuse him of cheating. More likely to believe it was some sort of glitch rather than him intentionally lying. Todd Rogers is a great video game player, so I don't question that maybe there is a slight difference in carts. Twin Galaxy ref Ron Corcoran joins the thread. Oh wait, hold on. I think I have a better picture of him. Yes, that's his mugshot, and this guy is one of the biggest pieces of shit to walk the planet, so take what he says with a grain of salt. But I digress. Twin Galaxies had a confidentiality policy that protected submitted players' high scores from being shared without their permission. This was because top gamers feared their proprietary knowledge would be stolen and their scores beaten. So Ron enters the chat and assures everyone, Todd's score is totally legit. They have videotape record, and if Todd allows it, Ron will post it for everyone to see. But please be advised that he may decline as it has proprietary knowledge, very similar to Billy Mitchell's perfect Pac-Man patterns or Donkey Kong strategies. The top players are very protective of their patterns, strategies, and knowledge. Oh my lord, you cannot make this stuff up. A second Twin Galaxy ref, Wolf Morrow, shows up. He held the third place score in barnstorming and stated that he began voicing my concerns to one of the refs, but was assured it was legit. I got in a little trouble because I pushed the issue a little too far, and that after dozens of hours of exhaustive work, I came to the unfortunate conclusion that the time of 32.04 simply is not possible on a glitch-free run. A few days later, Ron is back with his tail between his legs. After looking through the archives, I was unable to find any solid evidence, photo or videotape, to this score, attributing the mix-up to a typo since he had a letter from Activision showing Todd achieved a best time on barnstorming of 32.74. According to Wolf Morrow, this is where the infamous coffee stain excuse came in. When we presented this evidence, we were attacked by fans and supporters of Todd, and eventually an excuse was cooked up that I lovingly refer to as the coffee stain excuse. Yes, after being attacked and told we were clueless about how good Todd was, one of the referees covered for him and claimed the document detailing his record had a coffee stain on the part where the record time was listed. Instead of throwing the record out and forcing Todd to do a legit one on videotape, they simply adjusted the record. So they end up removing the score from the leaderboard and replacing it with another score he did verified in person. Todd finally speaks up in the thread, and he seems to go along with the idea that this was just a simple typo. Sometimes in the jog of things, second and third party handling such delicate information like high scores and employees who work for major companies do not have the passion as we gamers have and the will to observe what materials they are forwarding. Todd, I have some news for you. This doesn't make you look any better. Let's pretend this story is true in Roger's make-believe world where he is the greatest video game player of the century. Sorry, Billy. That just means he allowed this fake score to be published for years without correction. But don't worry, Todd and Ron assure everyone Todd will post a video of him playing barnstorming in front of a live crowd soon. The video has yet to be posted, but I'm sure we just need to give him some time to get it uploaded. I mean, it's only been 22 years since he made that promise. The thread ends with everyone mostly satisfied that this was simply a typo. This leads us to rule 2 for all you wannabe cheats out there. Make sure when you fabricate a high score that the score is actually possible. Seems pretty obvious, but I guess it needs to be said. 3 months later, the members of AtariAge.com are raising questions again. Who is Todd Rogers, and why does he have the #1 score for just about every game? Why does he have some impossible scores? Most of his games are referee. Who is this referee that verifies this stuff? Todd Rogers is one of, if not the best, vintage gamers ever. All those scores are true, and he is very talented. Who else chimes in later, but none other than Ron. As for who is the ref, that would be me. Later in the thread, he says, a good number of Todd's scores have not yet been verified. I don't want to enter scores into the database and book of records without absolute proof. Okay, Ron. If this were true, then why were all of his records uploaded into the database and marked as verified by a referee? Todd took a little heat again, but he came out pretty much unscathed. That wouldn't be the case years later when his next high score came under scrutiny, though. Back in 1982, Todd set his most famous world record in DRAGSTER. The record was a lightning-fast 5.51 seconds, and as the story goes, he, along with 2 others, set the score around the same time. But according to Activision, the best score possible was 5.54, so they called up the 3 boys, who all claimed a score better than what Activision thought was a perfect run. Although there is no documentation of this, Todd says he was the only one with a convincing story on how he was able to score better than the programmed perfect run. So they honored his score of 5.51 and sent him a certificate to commemorate the occasion. The only way I beat the time was to engage the clutch at the countdown and rev up my engine in the red just before the count of 0. Just tap, 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 he says. And there you have it, the key to being faster than the programmed fastest time. From Todd, Mr. Activision, Rogers himself. This is how he signs all of his posts off, and I just find it funny because eventually, further along in the story, when he's really under scrutiny, part of his defense is that he had really nothing to gain by fabricating scores. But he is clearly very proud of this title, and I'm sure it's one he was very motivated to keep. Fast forward 25 years later in 2007, and Todd's record was, of course, unbroken, so he receives an award from Twin Galaxies, the impossible record on DRAGSTER. This story is so ludicrous you have to laugh. They literally give him an award unironically acknowledging his record was impossible. I know it's hard to read, but it says, Twin Galaxies is proud to honor Todd Rogers of Brooksville, Florida for achieving a world record that was thought impossible. On September 1st of 1982, Todd Rogers achieved a fast time of 5.51 seconds on the classic Atari title DRAGSTER. What made this record unique is that the game was designed to allow only a maximum fast time of 5.54 seconds and no faster. Rogers was able to score this impossible time by devising a way to pop the clutch in a manner unforeseen by the Activision game designers and beat the computer by 3/100ths of a second. In signing this commemorative poster, it is Twin Galaxies' heartfelt belief that Todd's unique record will stand forever. Was it their heartfelt belief or the fact that they knew the score was literally impossible? Todd would milk this record for all it was worth, and he truly thought it made him a star. Blogger Brett Weiss shared an encounter with Todd on his blog, saying that he had met Rogers at the Classic Gaming Expo in Las Vegas. He approached Brett's booth, where Brett happened to have a few copies of DRAGSTER for sale. They took a picture together, and later Brett went to the bathroom, and when he came back, much to my surprise, Todd had come back while I was gone and signed them without asking. I was stunned and a little irritated. Who does such a thing? At least he could have asked if I wanted them signed. I was tempted to confront Todd and tell him that doing such a thing was uncool, but he had always been nice to me in the past and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Plus, he meant well and thought he was doing me a favor, as he seemed to think his autograph would make the games more valuable. And DRAGSTER was a cheap game anyway, so it was no great loss, even if the games didn't sell because they were scribbled on. Rogers is fairly well known in the retro gaming community, but hardly a household name, especially before the cheating accusations. As such, his autograph wasn't really worth anything. Rogers' DRAGSTER record would obviously remain unbeaten, and so Guinness Book of World Records created a new record just for Todd. Longest standing video game record of nearly 35 years. 35 years later, and Todd had yet to recreate that score in front of cameras, but he had reasons for that, you know?
That was a bad game. now the camera's showing and I'm doing miserable. It's really strange because like when people do interviews or media, it's like I can't get below 584% or 581 for some strange reason. This stick is really sensitive too here. I'm pressing to the left and it's not shifting.
Now, I don't want to pretend to be some video game guru, because I'm not, and I also don't want to take away from the perfect timing and tapping sequence I'm sure is required to get an elite time in Dragster. But I mean, all you have to do is watch the game in action to know that the likelihood of only one man being able to figure out how to get a perfect score in this and not another single soul in 35 years could replicate it, it's just completely outlandish. The game only takes 10 seconds to play, and that's if you're bad at it. You could probably attempt the record 1,000 times in a single day. That's the thing about these old games too. There was a limit to the high scores or fastest times for pretty much all of them. That's why there were so many co-holders for the records. Rogers himself says in an interview that every time there was a new Activision newsletter published, I saw that others were close to my time on the game. So again, in the back of my head, I wasn't willing to surrender the Dragster score to anyone at any time, even today at 30 years later. He may have accepted just one too many records with this one though, because a month after his Guinness record, OMNIGAMER would make a post on the subreddit Speedrun. I disassembled and analyzed every line of code for this game. Based on all of this, I'm going to make the assertion 5.51 is not achievable in normal play. Even with some types of cheating, 5.51 is still very difficult to hit. According to Rogers himself, he starts in second gear. This might barely allow a 5.51 if true, but going through the game code, I don't see any means to advance past first gear during the countdown. You will be flagged as early no matter when you do it. Rogers' response to OmniGamer's finding was, not once was there any attempt on his part to contact me or question me on my methods. Instead, he chose to use bits and pieces of interviews I have done on my shifting patterns and use them as factual evidence of how I play, without ever actually seeing me play in person. Okay, fair enough. Rogers does claim to have the magic Dragster touch. But then he goes on Element 14 Presents, and it doesn't go well for him there either.
Ugh. We're getting there. I think you probably have to shift faster when you reach fourth gear.
Compress them down?
I think that there's a lot more testing to be done.
Unable to recreate his score there, he thinks more testing should be done. What further testing could that possibly be, Todd? This reminds me of the million ways Billy's team manipulated a machine to finally produce a girder finger. I think Todd agreed to this because he's been lying about the score for so long, he might truly actually believe he got a 5.51 at this point. And this leads us to our third and final rule in our guide on how not to cheat. Unless you have a crystal ball and can see future technological advances, you should probably just not cheat. I'm certain when Rogers claimed this score 35 years prior, the thought of someone being able to disassemble and analyze the code like this was completely unimaginable to him. Of course, in the wake of OmniGamer's finding, a dispute thread is opened on Twin Galaxies, but frustratingly, they make these records inaccessible once they are closed, so I can't speak to all the details of the thread, just the bits and pieces I was able to find scattered around. What I do know is after OmniGamer exposed Todd's Dragster score, dedicated gamers combed through the rest of Rogers' scores and, unsurprisingly, found numerous fishy records. On January 27th of 2018, Carl Jopes made a post on the Speedrun subreddit summarizing all of Rogers' ridiculous scores. Some that stood out to me were Rogers' claim of a 1698 in Wabbit, but Wabbit only goes up in increments of 25. He claimed over 1 million points on Fathom, when the next highest score at the time was a meager 142 points. His time of 27.51 in skiing was found to be impossible without exploiting a glitch. A flawless, pixel-perfect run would give you a time of 27.96. But if you toggle the difficulty switch mid-run, you can reset the skier's position to the center of the screen, thus saving time traveling back and forth across the screen. By doing this, it would allow you to match Rogers' score. He claimed a score in Bloody Wolf just 100 points shy of 1 billion. I can just imagine his thought process. 999,999,900. Sounds much more believable than 1 billion. The second place score at the time was literally over 900 million points less than Todd's. His record on Taz was 999,900, but gamers discovered the highest possible score was 999,500, 400 points less than Rogers. But wait, apparently Rogers had a rare 1984 release with a different scoring system. He claimed 99,999,990 points on legendary acts, but scoring only went up in increments of 50. His reported records were truly insane, unbelievable, unachievable. So how did they ever get approved? Probably a mixture of his good friends just taking him at his word, as well as him entering his own scores, which he was caught doing.
Where somebody had complained, I sort of know where this is going, about me entering my own scores. They have to understand the circumstances that were behind that, where I would submit a whole bunch of scores to both the referees that were governing over those platforms. Days go by, weeks go by, months go by, and I see other people's scores in the database that were more current than mine. And I'm like, well, I thought we had a due diligence process here where if someone enters scores and a referee verifies it, that should not be posted. Just because I sent them a bulk volume of scores, why would they select to put one's up over here, one's up over there, rather than mine, just like any other gamer? So I had reached out to both the referees and asked them, hey, look, what's going on? Why have you not, either one of you, posted any of my scores? Well, they had excuses, they were too busy. And I said, look, there's like less than 50 scores here. I'll put them in your behalf. But the thing is back then, when you were able to access the database, you had whatever referee was doing the verification and referee that verified.
Oh, and he also falsified documents. Todd addresses the fake certificate allegations by saying, "This brings me to my next Dragster topic, fake certificates. Back then, I was very enthusiastic about the gaming community and thought it would be a nice touch to recognize players' achievements by reviving a classic method popularized by Activision. While my design was based on Activision's original design, it was not an exact copy and was not on the same paper as the originals. I am unaware if any of my designs have survived over the years, but telling them apart from Activision's originals would not have been difficult." Somewhere along the lines, however, my concept was misconstrued as me making exact, perfect replicas of the original. This led to the theory that if I could make exact copies, that perhaps my own certificates were forged as well. I'm uncertain as to how this theory snowballed as it did, but it is completely false. I don't know, Todd. Looks like a pretty exact replica to me. To give Todd a bit of credit, Dragster's creator David Crane did stand by Todd's records, stating, "Activision validated Todd's Dragster score using the accepted methods of the day. The time to question any of those records has passed." Unfortunately for Rogers, David Crane's support wasn't enough. He couldn't produce any documentation for any of his thousands of records. No photos, no videos, nothing. He states this was thanks to scumbag Ron, and that his tapes got confiscated when the police searched his house, and that they weren't all returned after his arrest. But Apollo Legend did some research into this claim. He called the police station, who told him every tape had been returned. With all the evidence stacked against Todd, Twin Galaxy posted this tweet. "In the wake of damning information provided by a former Twin Galaxies referee, a formal decision has been made in the Todd Rogers Dragster dispute, which has resulted in his total removal and banning from Twin Galaxies scoreboards." Todd released a long statement on Facebook addressing this banning, saying that, "While I do maintain that Twin Galaxies is wrong in my particular case, if the investigation into my scores and subsequent banning can serve as a catalyst to clean the database of questionable scores and facilitate methods to catch future cheaters, this is a positive thing." Guinness Book of World Records published a Gamers Edition that included a paragraph about Todd's longest-standing game record, saying, "The absence of challengers raised suspicion in January of 2018. Twin Galaxies confirmed the time wasn't possible and he was stripped of his records." But this wasn't the end of Todd's story. Somewhere along the way, he decided it wasn't such a positive thing, and he decided to pull a Billy Mitchell and start suing. 2 years later, he sued Twin Galaxies and Guinness World Records, claiming damages of $3 million. The damages evaluation is hilarious, considering this was his living situation a decade before the Dragster cheating allegations.
"Oh, this is my room, and this is where I sleep on the floor. I usually have my blankets arranged."
The whole lawsuit was a mess. Todd hired a lawyer who misspelled his name in the first court filing on his behalf. Todd's lawyer then filed a motion to withdraw from the case, saying the client insists upon taking actions that the lawyer considers imprudent or with which the lawyer has a fundamental disagreement, and that representing Todd will result in an unreasonable financial burden on the lawyer or has been rendered unreasonably difficult by the client, basically saying, I think this lawsuit is frivolous. Todd then writes a letter trying to keep the lawsuit alive, saying his lawyer committed numerous errors throughout the course of his representation, not even being able to spell my name correctly on filings. The lawsuit didn't go anywhere and it seemed it was all said and done, but 2 years after the initial lawsuit, 4 years after the banning happened, he was back in court filing another lawsuit against Guinness. Ultimately, both lawsuits are thrown out and Guinness doesn't roll over and give him back his titles like they did for some other Sue Happy gamers. To summarize, Todd's lawsuits were a mess, his records were a lie, and his reputation went down in flames. I want to know in the comments who you think is worse, Billy Mitchell or Todd Rogers. In my opinion, at least Billy gave a little effort and tried to fake proof for his records. Todd didn't even try to make his records seem legitimate. But I think we can all agree that they are both morons.